My friends and family asked me to sharpen their knives. So in front of me is a selection of knives from a friend of mine. We're going to take one of these knives and see if we can turn it from a blunt knife to be a sharp knife. So the first question we ask ourselves is, how do we tell it's blunt? And there's a number of ways of doing that. The first way of doing that is called the nail test. And you take a nail, you put the knife on the nail, tip the nail away, and the knife slides off. With a sharp knife, that will stick to the nail rather than sliding off. The second way is to see whether this knife will slice through a piece of paper. And you can see that it's tearing the paper. It's not cutting through that piece of paper. The third way is the tomato test. Will this knife slice a tomato? And you can see that this knife is completely blunt. It's not going through that tomato. So we're going to sharpen this knife, and we're going to use this machine, which is a Tormek T8 knife sharpening machine. It has a sharpening stone which sits in a reservoir of water, and the water is there to carry away the molecular sized pieces of steel that we're going to take off the edge of the knife. The way that we measure the coarseness of a stone like this is similar to sandpaper, and this particular stone is quite coarse. It's 1,000 grit, but in knife sharpening terms, that's actually reasonably fine. So the first thing we're going to do is put the knife onto a jig. The jig holds the knife in place at a fixed angle all the time that you're sharpening. So there's no risk of losing the angle. I'm trying to achieve the same angle on the bevel of the knife on both sides of the blade. In this case, we've chosen an angle of 20 degrees, which is normal for Western knives. Some Japanese knives you would sharpen at 15 degrees, which is a bit shallower, but for this knife we're going to choose 20 degrees. I'm going to turn the machine on. The stone turns towards me at a speed of 90 revolutions per minute, and I'm going to sharpen the blade on the stone. You can probably hear the stone taking the steel off the knife. That's one pass. I'm going to do a second pass on the same side of the stone. And a third pass. Each time we pass the knife over the stone, molecular pieces of steel come off the blade and are taken into the reservoir. What we do with a knife like this, which is exceptionally blunt, is we pass the knife 7 or 8 times across the stone on one side, and then the same on the other side. Then we turn the jig over and we repeat the exercise on the other side. We don't exert very much pressure on the knife, we let the stone do the work. And then we repeat again on the other side. And with each pass we make, we're taking metal off of the knife to create a bevel on the knife on each side. And the bevel will be a constant 20 degrees because that's what the machine is set to for this knife. As we do each side more and more, we do fewer passes on the stone. So we started off with 7 or 8 on each side, and gradually we're reducing that. And now we're doing 3 on each side. This is the second one. Okay, and stop. We've now created a bevel on the knife. So the second stage is to change the stone. And this time, we're going to put a different stone on, and the coarseness of this stone is 4,000 grit. We put the stone in the reservoir to make sure that the stone can absorb the water. We need that happening. This is the second stage. So the first stage was to sharpen the knife. The second stage, with a 4,000 grit stone, is to polish the edge, because we want the cut of the knife to be as smooth as possible. And we repeat the process. If you look carefully, you can see this light blue stone becoming gradually greyer and greyer as the steel comes off the knife. We're going to do 3 passes on each side to start with, starting with the heel of the knife and working towards the tip. And that will give us a mirrored finish on the edge of the bevel. So that's the second stage. The third stage is to use a leather strop. And in front of me I've got half a dozen different types of strop. This one is a strop which has got a honing compound on it, and honing compounds come in different colours. The red compound, which is on this strop, is a medium compound, the equivalent to 2000 grit. The white compound, which is on here, is a fine compound, and that's the equivalent of 5000 grit. The reason we want to hone the knife is to get the finest possible edge that we can on that knife. You can see the black marking on this strop, which has got 5000 grit honing compound on it. Those markings of black are tiny bits of metal. So what we do, having polished it on the machine, is we just run it over the strop a few times to get those final edges as polished as possible. A few passes like that. Then we'll pass to the green strop, which has got an 8000 grit on it, once or twice. This strop, interestingly, is made not from cow leather. This is made from the leather from the tail of a kangaroo, which is supposed to be the hardest type of natural leather strop that you can get. And lastly, we pass it over a regular, untreated leather strop, just to give it the finishing touch. An untreated strop like this would have the equivalent fineness of about 15,000 grit, so it's extremely fine, and that will give a very sharp edge. So, how sharp is our knife? The first test was the nail test, and if I put this knife on there, you can see that that is sticking to my nail right up to 60 or 70 degrees. Second test, will it cut paper? And the third test, will it cut a tomato? How finely will it cut a tomato? So we've seen 3 tests of sharpness. There is a 4th test of sharpness. I said I wanted this knife to be as sharp as a razor. Will it shave my arm? If I run the knife gradually over my arm, there's the hairs falling off. That is a sharp knife.